from a privileged background, being a minority and being a woman was so much against her, and how she managed to come up and fight those barriers. But the others, though they came from privileged backgrounds, they had, it was like go through so many problems, from riches to rags to riches kind of a thing. Self-made successes in a way, because they had to steer their businesses out of it. For me, it's been, the takeaways have been, you can always reinvent yourself. And I feel I have learned so much. They may have asked me to write the book, or I may have got it in my own head to write the book about their lives. But I have learned a lot, and I feel it has impacted my life. So for me, the takeaway is, intellectually, it's been so stimulating, and it's also affected the way I lead my life. And I honestly think that anybody who reads a biography of late, not when the time when we were in school or college, but of late, I'm very happy to know that a very contemporary style of writing appeals to readers, and I'm very happy that it's a fairly decent turnout today, don't you think? Anyway.
My interest was in storytelling. I didn't want to do a serious book, about both Muthulakshmi, even Rangabhashyam. I needed to start like a storyteller, begin with describing the scene and kind of. So though it was very serious, I was looking at how he got his FRCS, and the innovations he did in his surgery. I looked at videos that he had, recorded his own surgery that he was doing. He had got them recorded. I was looking at all that and describing in my book. So it was a huge book. And of course, there was no question of any challenge of questioning him, because the family had commissioned it, So it was a tribute that the family wanted to give him, and it was not for sale. It was a huge book. But Muthulakshmi Reddy and Rukmini Devi, I needed to answer the challenges, answer the questions, and bring in the controversy and give their point of view, So.
Shall we throw it open to questions? Does anybody have any questions? Oh, yeah, please. Do you need a mic? Yeah, sure.
Hi. When you write biographies, like usually there's especially when we when I've read certain autobiographies, they tend to exclude some part of themselves which gives a false image, right? So we all read biographies to take inspiration. Sorry, my throat.
Hold your mic like this.
Yeah, okay. So
horizontally. Yeah.
So I think my question is, like, have you had instances where you had to exclude, especially when you work with somebody who's actually alive, that you have to exclude such pieces where it might bring a false image to the person. But if you actually do it, if it's actually done, it actually creates a pressure. As in, when we read, we tend to assume that they're all perfect. As humans, we all err. But so when we include such pieces, it also gives kind of the reader an assurance that it's okay to err. And I think biographies should also include it. But I'm sorry, do you feel, do you ever get such instances, and how do you?
Yeah, see, one of the things that I have, one of the things that I have insisted when I have my initial meeting is that they have to be frank. They have to talk about the tough situations, either of their own making, the mistakes they have made, or what fate has brought to them, and their failures. Because everybody knows now that life is nothing but a series of failures over which you triumph. So that is very important, and I make it clear to them that they have to address it honestly, and that is what will give them a connection with the readers. And I'm happy to say that people are authentic. They want to show their authentic selves. It may be a bit of a struggle. Sometimes they want some time to think over it, sleep over it, and they discuss it with their families or whatever, and then they call and say, okay. And by that time, I would have built a rapport with them. It's very, very important for the biographer to build a rapport with the person, if they're alive, or with their family. They have to trust you. You can also be somebody random, you may have no connection. If they're a public figure, you can still want to write about it. And then, of course, you can write whatever you want. But I think nobody wants to do a hatchet job. So we try to present things. We are all human. We have our foibles. But how do we make a connection with the reader is only by being authentic. Thank you for that question. Jayashree?
When you write a biography, that person is most of the time not alive. And we would have read about that person. And as Devika said, she has to be careful about what she is writing. And most of the time, you keep writing, elevating that person. Most of the nothing negative about them. Nothing like a daily life or anything. And how do you manage that?
You want to answer? No, she's your sister. Let them answer. Sorry. I think both of them, she's written about Kurian, who was quite a controversial figure, and he's written about Vishveshwaraya, who was deified. So I think I should let them answer this.
So about Kurian, I was rewriting the biography. The first autobiography was co-authored by himself. So he was a very open book who himself has written about every single controversy that has happened in his life. So it was not a big deal for me. But for Kunyukutti Thamprati, I was already grasping at straws to get the research material on her from whatever magazines or newspapers I was having. I was trying so hard to put it all down together. But even then, I did not feel like the need to omit anything, because when you're writing about someone who has lived a long time ago, it is very difficult to connect their story with the young audience or the audience that lives today. So for them, for you all to understand it, I think I have to humanize the subject with every vulnerability they had, so that you will know what their life is and the setting in which they lived. So I did not have the need to omit anything while I was writing.
Thank you. Also a very interesting question. I think with Vishveshwaraya, as you said, one of the challenges is that he is deified so much. He's very rightly revered and respected for all that he did, but he was a human being. As somebody mentioned here, if we look at people as perfect beings descended from heaven, then it's very discouraging for the rest of us. And it's also not very historically accurate. So he was a person who had his own insecurities. He was sensitive about certain things. He had his bitter critics when he when he commissioned the projects on Krishnarajasagar Dam and Bhadravati Iron and Steel Works. Throughout the 20s, he had people writing in the newspapers criticizing this as white elephants and spending of public money. There was a very virulent critic who wrote anonymously, and then he responded to him. You can see the certain emotional sort of turmoil going on in him. He's questioning himself, he's giving justifications, but ultimately he acted in what he thought were the best interests of the public. So I think it's very, very important to not take for granted any statement made by either the subject themselves or by their critics, and try to look also for independent sources of information. If there's a dispute over a budget or over how much was spent over a project, can we find an independent account that tells us what was happening? And ultimately, there's no such thing as the absolute truth. We have to get as close to it as we can through looking at multiple perspectives, keeping an open mind. I think it's possible to be empathetic without making a person seem unnaturally perfect. And I think this is what is the challenge that all of us have been trying to grapple with. So I think we look at their voice, we try to capture the voices of others who wrote letters to them, maybe who fought with them, others who supported them, what are newspapers saying. If you're looking at newspaper articles, you have to look at newspapers of different ideological standpoints, right? Some newspapers are going to support this person no matter what, and some are going to criticize him. So you have a variety of ways of getting at this texture.
I just remembered, I want to say this because it's a very cute story. Just a couple of days ago, our latest book, we are also publishers at Raintree Media, my company. We published a book, and just 2 days ago, the client who commissioned the book, it's a book about his family. He released it. He had a lovely little release function in Goa. And I remember in the beginning when he said I had to write, and it's about his mother who had done so much, And he is not a very articulate person, so it was really hard for me to get access, and she was no more. He told me, you know what, you come and visit the village where she grew up, and she will come to you. You will know exactly what you feel like. It's not a ghost story, but honestly, when I visited Cabo in Goa, and I walked down the fort, and I saw the little cottage where she lived, and I walked around, and I came back to Bangalore, and I sat at my laptop. It was suddenly, Maria was inside me, and I could channel her. It was so lovely. So that is a way that you can channel a person who is no more and bring their story alive. Any other? I think we have time for one last question. Right? Are we good on time? We have time. Take the mic, Sandhya. Take the mic. Somebody can give this? You can give this.
Can I maybe take a question?
Sure.
Yeah, hi. I actually wanted to add to what ma'am said. I had that question in my mind and she was talking about perspectives. As soon as ma'am started talking about Muthu Lakshmi, the first thing which came to my mind was the African proverb, I guess, that till the lion learns how to write, it's the hunter who will be glorified in every story. So as a biographer with a value system which is innate to you, similar to how I would write with my own value system, so the question which I had was in two parts. One was, how do you ensure that your own bias doesn't come into what you write, which I think happens with a lot of biographies which I read, and I really don't like when that happens because you have your own version or opinion coming in. The second part of my question is, do you guys use any form of AI, Gen AI tools right now where the perspective can be removed or you can further, play with it in a way where it becomes more objectified, I would say. That's the thing which I want to ask.
I think we should, when you're writing about a person, you are definitely trying to empathize with them. And if people think that it's a journalistic point of view of looking at a criticism, even those who are critiquing are looking at it from another point of view, So it is, I am answering them. My Muthulakshmi Reddy biography, Rukmini Devi has been documented very, very well. So I had to just tell her story differently from the other books that are there. But Muthulakshmi Reddy, I needed to tell her story newly because the narration that was in Currency was against her. I needed to make her stand there and tell her story. It was definitely in defense of her. And my perspective, my understanding of what she did, after I have read a lot of criticisms and interviewed a lot of people and looked at those who had benefited from her activism. I interviewed 700 people. Families who had benefited from her activism, which is why this little book tells her story. Please buy it and read it.
I think we'll just give, yeah, sure. Okay. No, we have like a few seconds. Anybody wants to have the last word?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, and thank you for that question. I think, of course, we want to keep as open a mind as possible. We want to imagine different people looking at this person, how would they have understood them, and try to keep it open. So if I give you enough of the context, then despite what I say, although I am framing the narrative, you will be able to form your own conclusions, right? So if I close off that option by giving you a very strong interpretation, which is not borne out by the facts, then it's a problem. But otherwise, I am a human being. It is going to be refracted through my words, but you still have the option to make up your mind based on what's presented. So I hope that's what we achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's our cue to get off the stage. Thank you so much for joining us and hearing our stories.